Never underestimate the woman who smelled like old books while you reeked of ambition. Tak Kwong thinks he's returning to a pregnant wife who'll swallow another lie. But he has no idea she's already erased herself from his life, taking his future with her. On a blood-soaked night in Seoul, a ruthless Korean mafia boss drives home high on power. Fresh from a hotel suite where he sealed a dangerous alliance and left his mistress's perfume on his skin. To him, the city's underworld bows at his feet, and his wife's 17 missed calls feel like pregnant hysteria he can silence with a rehearsed corporate excuse. But when he steps into his penthouse, the emptiness cuts like a blade. No weeping. No accusations. Just a pink diamond ring glinting under cold light, a surgical goodbye note, and the first fracture in a criminal empire he believed was unshakable. What follows isn't abandonment. It's a 5-year demolition, detonated in a single night. Welcome to the channel. You're about to experience a story that will stay with you long after it ends. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need this story today. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories to life. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And now, let's dive straight into the story. The penthouse smelled wrong. Tak Kwong noticed it the moment the private elevator doors whispered open. Not the usual blend of Maya's vanilla candles and whatever floral thing she kept in the entryway, but something sterile. Clinical. Like a hospital corridor or a crime scene after the cleaners had finished. He loosened his tie, still riding the high of the night's victory, and stepped into the marble foyer. His reflection multiplied in the floor-to-ceiling mirrors. Sharp suit, sharper jaw, the kind of man who owns cities, not just buildings. 17 missed calls sat heavy in his pocket, but he'd deal with Maya's theatrics after a shower. Pregnant women were emotional. It was biology, not his problem. The living room stretched before him like an accusation. Empty. Not just quiet empty. Surgically empty. The cream sectional sofa remained, because it had cost more than most people's cars and matched the architect's vision. But the throw pillows Maya had insisted on, those ugly hand-woven things from some artisan market she dragged him to, were gone. The bookshelves that used to groan under her collection of poetry and art history and those stupid romance novels she thought he didn't know about stood bare, their glass shelves reflecting nothing but his own stunned face. Tak Kwong's pulse kicked up, the way it did before violence. He moved through the space like a predator tracking blood. The walls were lighter in spots where her paintings had hung. The corner where she'd kept that ridiculous vintage record player and her grandmother's quilt, empty. Even the kitchen counter, usually cluttered with her prenatal vitamins and grocery lists and the coffee she wasn't supposed to drink but did anyway, cleared down to the marble, gleaming like it had never been touched. 7,000 square feet of luxury, and suddenly it felt like a mausoleum. Then he saw it. On the dining table, the one they'd hosted the Kim family at, the one where he'd signed the Busan port agreement in blood and ink, sat a single object. The ring. Not just any ring. The ring. The pink diamond monstrosity he'd spent an obscene amount on because Maya had mentioned, once in passing, that her mother used to say pink diamonds meant eternal love. He'd bought it to shut her up about wanting something meaningful for their 5th anniversary, slid it on her finger at a Michelin-starred restaurant with photographers he'd personally arranged, and she'd cried like he'd given her the moon. Now it sat alone on the bare table, catching the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows, throwing fractured rainbows across with that looked like it had been polished to erase fingerprints. Next to it, a note. Plain white cardstock. Her handwriting. That annoyingly elegant script she'd probably learned at whatever pretentious international school her diplomat parents had sent her to. Asterisk, thank you for the 5 years. I've taken what's mine. You can keep what's yours. Asterisk. No signature. No explanation. Just those 2 sentences, written with the kind of calm that made his skin crawl because Maya didn't do calm. Maya did passion and tears and those big wounded eyes that used to make him feel like a monster. Maya did accusations and slammed doors and the kind of suffering that was supposed to make him feel guilty enough to lie better next time. She didn't do surgical. Tak Kwong picked up the ring, and it felt heavier than it should, like it was weighted with something he couldn't name. The band was still warm. She'd been here recently. Maybe she was still here, hiding in one of the bedrooms, waiting for him to find her so she could deliver whatever speech she'd rehearsed. Maya. His voice echoed in the emptiness, sharp and commanding, the voice that made grown men confess. I know you're here. This childish shit ends now. Silence answered. Not the silence of someone holding their breath. The silence of a place that had already been abandoned. Tak Kwong read the note again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Asterisk, thank you for the 5 years. I've taken what's mine. You can keep what's yours. Asterisk. Polite. Civilized. Like she was returning a borrowed book, not dismantling a marriage. Like she hadn't spent the last 8 months growing his heir, calling him 20 times a day about nursery colors and baby names he'd told her to handle herself because he had actual work to do. He turned the cardstock over. Nothing. No tear stains, no angry scrawls, no PS begging him to come find her. Just that infuriating thank you, as if he'd done her some kind of favor by putting a ring on her finger and a baby in her belly. His hand crumpled the note without thinking. The sound of paper crushing was obscenely loud in the empty penthouse. She'd been crying for weeks. He'd heard it through the bedroom door when he came home late, those shaking, breathless sobs that women did when they wanted you to feel like the villain. He'd ignore them, pour himself a drink, let her exhaust herself. By morning she'd be puffy-eyed and quiet, making him coffee like nothing had happened, because that's what Maya did. She absorbed. She forgave. She stayed. Women like Maya always stayed. He stalked toward the master bedroom, jaw tight enough to crack teeth. Maybe this was some kind of breakdown. Pregnancy hormones. She'd probably holed up at that friend's apartment. What was her name? The annoying one who worked in publishing and always looked at him like he was something she'd stepped in. He'd send Min Jun to bring her back, have a doctor check her out, and this would all be forgotten by tomorrow. But the bedroom stopped him cold. The bed was made with hotel precision, corners sharp, pillows arranged symmetrically, the kind of sterile perfection that screamed professional cleaning service. His side looked untouched. Her side looked like it had never existed. The nightstand where she kept her books and that stupid vintage lamp shaped like a bird. Empty. The dresser where her jewelry box used to sit, overflowing with things he'd bought her and things her grandmother had left her. Gone. Even the full-length mirror had been wiped clean of the sonogram photos she'd taped there like some kind of shrine. Tak Kwong moved to the mirror, his reflection staring back at him with an expression he didn't recognize. There were no torn corners, no adhesive residue, nothing to prove those black and white images of his children had ever existed. She'd even removed the evidence of their removal. He yanked open her closet. Bare hangers. Not a single dress, not a shoe, not even a forgotten scarf shoved in the back. The space smelled faintly of cedar and nothing else. No trace of her perfume, that vanilla Anne, something he'd stopped noticing years ago but suddenly, violently missed. His own clothes hung on the other side, untouched. Suits organized by color. Shirts pressed and waiting. Like he lived here alone. Like he'd always lived here alone. The bathroom was worse. Her skincare products that used to crowd the counter. Gone. The pregnancy vitamins. The face masks. That ridiculous silk sleep mask she wore because she claimed his late-night phone calls disrupted her REM cycle. Even her toothbrush had been removed from the holder, leaving his standing solitary like a gravestone. The only thing she'd left behind was space. Tak Kwong braced himself against the marble counter, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The man looking back at him had built an empire on fear and blood and the kind of ruthlessness that made other men religious. He'd ended lives with less emotion than most people fired employees. He'd watched men beg and felt nothing. But this surgical extraction, this methodical erasure, felt like something worse than violence. It felt like she'd already mourned him, already buried whatever she'd felt, already moved on while he was still standing in the grave she'd dug. And he had no idea how long she'd been digging. The security room was in the basement, tucked behind a door that looked like a utility closet but opened with a fingerprint scanner and a 16-digit code. Tak Kwong had designed it himself. 3 screens, military-grade encryption, footage that fed directly to a server only he could access. He'd installed it to monitor threats from outside. He never imagined he'd be using it to track his own wife. His fingers shook as he pulled up today's footage, and he hated himself for it. Tak Kwong didn't shake. Tak Kwong made other people shake. But something cold had lodged itself in his chest, spreading like frost through his lungs, and he couldn't seem to breathe right. The timestamp read 2 p.m. 7 hours ago. He'd been in the hotel suite with Sohee, celebrating the Incheon deal with champagne and her mouth on his neck while the screen flickered to life. Maya stood in the living room, very much not crying. She wore black, a fitted dress under that gray trench coat she'd bought in Paris, the one he'd said made her look like she was playing dress-up. Her hair was pulled back in those long braids she'd gotten done last week, and her face was calm. Not tear-stained. Not puffy. Calm in a way that made his blood run cold because he'd never seen Maya calm when she was angry. She was directing movers. 3 of them, professionals by the look of it, and she was pointing to specific items with the kind of terrifying authority he recognized because he used it himself. The tall one in the blue uniform nodded and carefully removed her grandmother's painting from the wall. Another wrapped her books in brown paper like they were made of glass. The third was disassembling that ugly record player she'd loved more than she'd ever loved him. Tak Kwong leaned closer to the screen. His jaw clenched so tight it ached. She wasn't frantic. Wasn't rushed. She moved through the space like a general executing a battle plan, checking items off a list on her phone, directing traffic with the kind of precision that came from preparation. This wasn't a breakdown. This wasn't a hormonal pregnant woman making an impulsive decision. This was an operation. Then she did something that made his vision go red. Maya walked to his office, his private office that she knew better than to enter without permission, and emerged carrying the bottle. The 1926 Macallan. 60 years old. $5,000. He'd told her explicitly the day he brought it home that it was not to be touched. It was an investment. A trophy. Something you looked at, not consumed. She held it like a weapon. The camera captured everything in high definition. Maya twisting off the cap with deliberate slowness, walking to the center of the living room where his vintage Persian rug sprawled across the marble. The one he'd bought at auction in Dubai, the one he'd specifically told her to keep the furniture off of because it was worth more than most people's houses. She tipped the bottle. Golden liquid poured out in a stream, splashing onto white silk fibers, soaking in, spreading like blood. She emptied it methodically, moving in a slow circle, christening his most prized possession with his most expensive liquor, and her face never changed. Never showed anger or satisfaction or anything at all. When the bottle was empty, she set it down on the wet rug, checked her phone, and gave the movers a nod. Tak Kwong's fist slammed into the desk before he could stop himself. The pain was distant, irrelevant. He rewound the footage, watched it again. That same terrifying calm. That same deliberate destruction. This wasn't about the rug or the cognac. This was a message. She was showing him exactly how much his precious things meant to her. How easily they could be ruined. How little power he actually had over what she chose to destroy. And she'd done it 7 hours ago, while he was still inside another woman, still thinking he was untouchable. The safe was behind the Rothko in his office. The painting Maya had always hated, said it looked like a bleeding wound. Appropriate considering what he kept behind it. Tak Kwong's hands were steadier now, the initial shock calcifying into something harder, more familiar. Anger he could work with. Anger had a trajectory, a target, a solution that usually involved his fist or a well-placed phone call. He'd find her. Drag her back. Remind her exactly who she'd married and what happened to people who embarrassed him. The safe required 3 codes and a retinal scan. Overkill for most people, but Tak Kwong hadn't built an empire by being careless. Inside was everything that mattered. Offshore account numbers, blackmail material on half the Korean National Assembly, deeds to properties purchased under shell corporations, and documentation of business arrangements that would earn him life sentences in multiple countries. The steel door swung open. Everything looked untouched at first glance. The stacks of cash in various currencies. The external hard drives. The false passport. But something was off, the arrangement slightly different, like someone had moved things and put them back almost correctly. His medical records were in the back, in a manila envelope he'd marked with a red X. He'd kept them here because Maya had a bad habit of cleaning, of organizing, of touching things that weren't hers. The vasectomy paperwork from the Swiss clinic was supposed to be his secret. His insurance policy against the kind of trap women like her mother had probably taught her to set. Get pregnant. Lock down the rich man. Secure the future. He'd been so fucking smart, getting the procedure done 3 years ago on a business trip to Zurich. Told her he was meeting with pharmaceutical investors. Instead, he'd spent 2 days in a private clinic, ensuring that no woman would ever have that kind of leverage over him. Maya had been talking about babies even then, her eyes going soft whenever they passed children in restaurants, and he'd smiled and nodded and said, "Soon, darling," while making sure soon would never come. Except she was 8 months pregnant, which meant the baby wasn't his, and he'd been planning exactly how to handle that revelation. The divorce, the public humiliation he'd rained down on her, the way he'd make sure she left with nothing but shame. Tak Kwong pulled out the envelope. It was lighter than it should be. Inside, instead of his original medical records, was a photocopy. His name. His signature. The Swiss clinic's letterhead. The doctor's notes confirming successful bilateral vasectomy, 0 sperm count, permanent sterility. And paperwork clipped to it, a note in Maya's handwriting. Asterisk, found these in 2022. You're a terrible liar, but an even worse husband. The baby is yours. You'll want to ask Dr. Choi about reversals and your little emergency appointment last January. Surprise. Darling. You're going to be a father after all. Pity you won't be in their lives to disappoint them personally. Asterisk. The paper crumpled in his fist. 2022. She'd known for 3 goddamn years. 3 years of watching him, smiling at him, sleeping next to him, carrying his child, all while knowing he'd tried to make sure she could never have one. And Dr. Choi, his private physician, the one man he'd trusted with the reversal procedure when he decided, on a whim, really, after seeing the Kim empire pass to a nephew because the boss had no heirs, that maybe a biological legacy wasn't the worst idea. That was in January, 10 months ago. He'd told Maya he was in Busan for negotiations. She'd known about the vasectomy. She'd probably known about the reversal. She'd known everything while he'd been playing chess against an opponent who'd memorized all his moves 3 years ago. The safe suddenly looked less like a fortress and more like a joke. Every secret he'd thought protected, she'd already catalogued. Every lie he'd thought airtight, she'd already dissected. Tak Kwong's reflection stared back at him from the Rothko's glass, and for the first time in his adult life, he looked like prey. The phone started vibrating at 11:47 p.m. Not the personal phone, the one currently useless because Maya wasn't answering and probably never would again. The work phone. The encrypted one that only rang when empires were shifting or someone important was dying. Tak Kwong stared at it for 3 full seconds before answering, still standing in his office with the photocopy of his vasectomy records scattered at his feet like evidence at a crime scene. What? Not a question. A demand. Min Jun's voice came through tight and scared, which was wrong because Min Jun had helped him dispose of bodies and never sounded scared. Sir, you need to check your email. No. The board. Tak Kwong was already moving to his laptop, phone pressed between shoulder and ear. The board meets quarterly. Next session isn't until March. They called an emergency session. It's already happening. They're voting. The email loaded. Emergency board meeting. Motion 2026-001. Vote of no confidence. Executive leadership. Triggered by Sterling Trust Holdings. 32% share position. Seconded by Internal Compliance Whistleblower. The timestamp read 9 p.m. 2 hours ago. While he'd been watching security footage of his wife destroying his belongings, his own board had been gathering like vultures. Sterling Trust Holdings. The name detonated in his skull like a flashbang. He'd never heard of them. Didn't recognize the entity. But they apparently owned a third of his company. Enough to trigger emergency procedures, enough to call votes, enough to move mountains he'd thought were permanently settled in his favor. He scrolled down, his breath coming faster. The motion outlined credible evidence of financial misconduct, undisclosed conflicts of interest, and material misrepresentation to shareholders. There was an attachment, A 47-page document marked confidential that he absolutely did not have authorization to open, which meant his own company had locked him out of his own investigation. Min-June. His voice came out strangled. Who the fuck is Sterling Trust? Silence on the other end, then. We're looking into it. The registration is offshore. Layered. But sir, there's more. The Financial Supervisory Service received an anonymous tip this morning. They're opening a formal investigation into the Busan port acquisitions and the Kim family arrangements. The Kim family arrangements that were finalized in blood contracts and handshake agreements that would never survive legal scrutiny. The ones that involved money laundering through shell corporations and profit sharing with men who'd as soon kill you as negotiate with you. The ones that were entirely, catastrophically illegal if anyone ever looked closely. Someone gave them our ledgers, Tak Kwong said flatly. It looks that way, yes. His mind was racing now, that cold tactical part of his brain finally kicking in past the shock. The FSS didn't move this fast unless they had something ironclad. Anonymous tips got buried in bureaucracy for months. Unless someone had walked them through it step by step. Unless someone had made it so obvious, so documented, so gift-wrapped that they had no choice but to act. The whistleblower, he said. Who is it? The filing is anonymous. But, Min-June hesitated. Sir, the compliance breach was reported from your home IP address. This afternoon. 2:47 p.m. 2:47 p.m. Tak Kwong pulled up the security footage again, fast-forwarding to the timestamp. There was Maya sitting at his desk in his office, the one she'd been forbidden from entering, with his laptop open, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the kind of speed that came from knowing exactly what she was looking for. She'd been in his system. In his files. In his fucking company infrastructure. Probably for God knows how long, downloading everything. The movers had been a distraction. The cognac on the rug had been theater. This was the real demolition. Not his marriage. Not his home. His empire. Get Ko on the phone, Tak Kwong said, his voice ice. And find out every piece of property Sterling Trust owns. Every shell company. Every connection. I want to know who's behind it by morning. But he already knew. He'd been married to her for 5 years. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves a good drama. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Some storms are not sent to destroy you. They are sent to deliver you into the arms of your destiny. Tak Kwong didn't remember driving to Sohee's apartment. One moment he was in his penthouse surrounded by evidence of his own stupidity. The next he was standing outside the luxury high-rise in Gangnam, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. Sohee would have answers. She always had answers, or at least distractions effective enough that answers stopped mattering. She'd pour him something expensive, tell him Maya was crazy, that pregnant women did insane things, that he was the victim here. She'd make him feel like the man he was supposed to be instead of whatever pathetic thing was currently unraveling in his chest. He took the elevator to the 14th floor, the one he'd purchased under a shell corporation 2 years ago. The apartment where he'd celebrated the Incheon deal just hours earlier, where Sohee had looked at him like he'd hung the moon and called him Appa in that breathy way that made him feel powerful. The door was locked with a different lock. Not the electronic keypad he'd installed. An old-fashioned deadbolt, the kind students used in cheap apartments. Tak Kwong knocked. Then pounded. Sohee. Opened the door. The locks turned, and a kid answered. Maybe 22, wearing a BTS hoodie and holding a bowl of ramen, looking at Tak Kwong like he was a door-to-door salesman who'd interrupted dinner. Can I help you? English. American accent. Confused but polite. Where's Lee Sohee? The kid blinked. I don't know a Lee Sohee. I'm subletting from a Jessica Park. She's in Singapore for work or something. Are you with the building management? Tak Kwong's hand shot out, gripping the doorframe. This is my apartment. Dude, I have a lease. The kid was backing up now, ramen sloshing. Jessica showed me the deed and everything. I've been here for 3 weeks. If there's some kind of ownership dispute, you need to take it up with. Tak Kwong pushed past him. The apartment was wrong. Completely wrong. Where Sohee's minimalist white furniture had been, there were IKEA bookshelves and a gaming setup. Anime posters on the walls. A bicycle leaning against the breakfast bar. The bedroom where he'd fucked her 7 hours ago now had Star Wars sheets and dirty laundry on the floor. Hey, you can't just... The kid was following him, phone out now, probably calling security. The closet where Sohee kept the dresses he'd bought her. Empty except for hoodies and jeans. The bathroom where her expensive skincare had lined the counter. Stocked with drugstore shampoo and a single toothbrush. No trace of her. Like she'd never existed. Tak Kwong grabbed the kid by his hoodie. Slammed him against the wall hard enough to rattle the anime posters. Jessica Park. Where is she? I don't know, man. I found the listing online. She met me once to sign papers. I Venmo her rent. Show me the lease. The kid scrambled for his laptop with shaking hands. Pulled up a PDF. The deed looked legitimate. Notarized, official. Property owner. Jessica Park. Purchase date. November 2023. Over a year ago, which was impossible because Tak Kwong had bought this apartment in 2022 and Sohee had moved in that December. Except apparently she hadn't. He scrolled to the rental agreement. There, in the tenant information. Kevin Morrison, USC exchange student, moved in January 2nd. 3 weeks ago. Which meant Sohee had been gone since before New Year's. Before Maya left. Before any of this started unraveling. No. Before he'd realized it was unraveling. Tak Kwong released the kid, his mind racing. He pulled out his phone, called Sohee's number. It rang once, then. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He tried her email. Bounced back. User does not exist. Her Instagram, the private one where she posted photos of them that he'd made her promise never to make public. Account deleted. Lee Sohee had been erased as thoroughly as Maya had erased herself from his penthouse. There was a woman, Tak Kwong said slowly, his voice deadly calm. Late 20s. Beautiful. Long hair. She would have been here in December. Kevin shook his head, still pressed against the wall. Jessica was the only person I met. She was like 30s maybe. Short hair. Glasses. Really professional. Not Sohee. Never Sohee. The realization hit him like a bullet. Sohee had never lived here. This had never been her apartment. She'd been using it, sure. Meeting him here, fucking him here, making him feel like a king here. But it had never been hers. It had been Maya's. The Osaka tarmac was wet with rain when Tak Kwong's jet touched down at 4:37 a.m. He'd burned every favor he had left, called in debts with Japanese associates, threatened men who thought they were untouchable, promised things he might not be able to deliver, all to get clearance to land at a private airfield and intercept a flight that wasn't supposed to exist. But he'd found her. Maya's jet was still there, sleek and white under the floodlights, fueling for a departure scheduled for 5 a.m. Seoul to Osaka to Vancouver, according to the flight plan his contact had pulled. Canada. She was running to fucking Canada with his children. Asterisk his asterisk children. The word had teeth now. He'd spent 8 months treating her pregnancy like an inconvenience, another item on a list of things Maya wanted that he had to tolerate. But standing in the rain watching her plane prepare for departure, feeling his empire crumble in real time back in Seoul, those babies were the only thing he had left that mattered. His legacy. His blood. His. Tak Kwong had brought 4 men, the one still loyal, still on his payroll, still too afraid of him to ask questions. They flanked him as he crossed the tarmac, his $1,000 shoes splashing through puddles, his hair plastered to his skull. The jet's stairs were down. He took them 2 at a time, ready to drag her off the plane by her braids if necessary, ready to invoke every international law about parental kidnapping, ready to. Maya was sitting in the main cabin, reading a book. Not frantically packing. Not crying. Not looking like a woman on the run. She wore a charcoal sweater and loose pants that accommodated her belly, her braids pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. The book was one of those thick literary novels she loved, the kind he'd always mocked her for reading. She turned a page without looking up. "You're late," she said. "I expected you an hour ago." The calm in her voice made him want to put his fist through the cabin wall. You're not getting on this plane. Tak Kwong moved toward her, his men filling the doorway behind him. I don't know what kind of breakdown you're having, but this ends now. You're coming back to Seoul, we're fixing this, and you're going to explain to the board that you made a mistake. I made several mistakes. Maya set down her book, finally meeting his eyes. Marrying you was the first. Believing you might change was the second. Waiting 5 years to leave was the third. Those are my children. These are my children. She rested a hand on her belly, protective. You signed away your parental rights 3 years ago when you got a vasectomy without telling me. Any family court in the world will side with me on that. I got it reversed. Without my knowledge or consent, which is reproductive coercion in 17 countries including Canada. She smiled, sharp and bitter. I've had very good lawyers, Kwong Ah. The best, actually. Your money bought them for me, thank you for that. He lunged for her, and suddenly there was a man between them. Not one of his men. Someone else. Tall, Western, built like he ate bullets for breakfast. Private security, the expensive kind. I wouldn't, the man said in English. This is kidnapping. Tak Kwong's voice shook with rage. International parental abduction. I'll have every authority from here to Vancouver hunting you down. I'll make sure you never see daylight again. You'll what? Maya stood slowly, awkward with the weight of the twins. You'll use your connections? The ones currently testifying against you to the FSS? You'll use your money? The account Sterling Trust is freezing as we speak? You'll use your reputation? The one that's about to be destroyed when your board votes you out in. She checked her watch. 4 hours. Sterling Trust. The name confirmation hit him like ice water. You, he breathed. Me, she agreed. Well, me and some very motivated investors who were happy to learn about your creative accounting. Turns out a lot of people don't appreciate being defrauded. Don't blink. Subscribe, comment your country, then watch what happens next. You're not ready. Maya reached into her bag, not frantically, not rushed, just a woman retrieving something she'd carefully packed, and pulled out a tablet. Before you go, she said, there's something you should see. Something your father wanted you to know. Tak Kwong's blood turned to sleet. My father is dead. I know. I attended the funeral, remember? Stood beside you in black while you pretended to grieve a man you'd been trying to impress your entire life. She tapped the screen, turned it toward him. He recorded this 2 weeks before the cancer took him. Asked his lawyer to give it to you when the time was right. The lawyer gave it to me instead, once I explained what kind of man you'd become. The video began. Tak Kwong Sr. sat in his study, the one Tak Kwong had inherited along with everything else. But the old man looked smaller than he remembered, hollowed out by illness, his legendary presence reduced to a dying man in a leather chair. Kwong Ah, the recording said, and even through the tablet speakers, his father's voice carried that disappointment Tak Kwong had spent 40 years trying to outrun. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and it means someone finally had the courage to tell you the truth I never could. No. You are not my biological son. The cabin tilted. Or maybe that was just Tak Kwong's world completing its collapse. Your mother, my wife, had an affair with our chauffeur. Park Jin-woo. Good man, actually. Better than me in most ways that mattered. The old man coughed, a wet rattling sound. When she got pregnant, we made a choice. I'd claim you as mine. Raise you as a Kwong. Give you everything the name entitled you to. In return, she'd end the affair, and Jinwoo would disappear. The screen showed his father pouring water with shaking hands. I kept my word. Gave you my name, my company, my reputation. Trained you to be ruthless because I thought that's what survival required. But somewhere along the way, you became something I never intended. You became cruel. Not strategic, cruel. There's a difference, and you never learned it. Tak Kwong couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. His men had gone silent behind him. The DNA test is attached to this file, his father continued. I had it done when you were 6, just to confirm what I already knew. You are Park Jin-woo's son, not mine. Which means, legally, you have no claim to the Kwong name, the Kwong fortune, or the Kwong legacy. The old man leaned forward, and his eyes, those eyes that had terrified Tak Kwong as a child, held only sadness now. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something before I die. Everything you built on a lie. Every person you crushed with borrowed power. Every time you invoked the Kwong name to make men kneel, you were wearing a costume. The recording paused while his father caught his breath. I've instructed my lawyer to transfer the company shares to their rightful heirs, your half-brothers, my legitimate sons from my second marriage. The ones you've spent years trying to push out of the business. They'll inherit what should have been theirs all along. Tak Kwong's phone buzzed. Then again. Then started ringing with the kind of persistence that meant emergency. He looked down at the screen through blurred vision. ***, board vote complete. Motion passed 9-2 ***. Effective immediately. Termination of executive authority ***. Asset freeze pending investigation ***. Another message, this one from the company lawyers. ***, Kwong family trust documents indicate fraudulent claim to inheritance. All assets reverting to legitimate heirs. Criminal investigation recommended. ***. The vote wasn't about confidence, Maya said softly. It was about legitimacy. Your half-brothers were very grateful when Sterling Trust provided them with the DNA evidence. They've been waiting years for proof. On the tablet, his father, not his father, never his father, delivered the final blow. I hope you find out who you are when you're not pretending to be a Kwong. Maybe that man will be worth knowing. The video ended. Tak Kwong stood in the cabin of a private jet, surrounded by men who were no longer his, holding a phone full of messages confirming he owned nothing, was no one, had nothing. He'd walked onto this plane as a tiger. He was leaving as prey. Before I reveal the truth, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. This twist changes everything. Maya stood, one hand braced against the seat for balance, the other resting on her belly where his children, her children, were sleeping, blissfully unaware their father had just died without actually dying. Tak Kwong expected venom. Expected her to gloat, to grind his face into the ruin she'd made, to become the monster he'd always accused women of being when they finally had power. Instead, she looked tired. I spent 3 years planning this, she said quietly. 3 years watching you. Learning you. Downloading every password, every account number, every dirty secret you thought you'd hidden well enough. Do you know what I learned? He couldn't speak. His throat had closed around words that didn't exist anymore. You were never actually smart. You were just cruel, and people mistake cruelty for strength when it's loud enough. She moved past him toward the exit, her security guard shadowing her. So he was a law student, by the way. Needed money for her mother's medical bills. I paid her triple what you were giving her to document everything. Every text. Every promise. Every time you called me a burden while you were inside her. The rain was louder now, hammering the fuselage. Sterling Trust was funded with money from the cognac collection you told me never to touch. Turns out I had 3 years to sell it piece by piece, and vintage liquor appreciates beautifully. Your 1926 Macallan that I poured on your rug. I'd already sold the Real bottle for $47,000. What I destroyed was a very expensive fake I had made just for that moment. She paused at the top of the stairs, rain misting through the open door. I wanted you to feel what you made me feel. Small. Stupid. Erased. I wanted you to know what it's like when someone you trust treats you like you're nothing. Her voice cracked, just slightly, the first real emotion breaking through. And now you do. Tak Kwong found his voice, raw and broken. The babies. Let me, I can change. I'll be better. You'll be a ghost story I tell them when they're old enough to ask why they don't have a father. Maya's eyes were wet now, but her voice stayed steady. I'll tell them their father was a man who confused fear for respect, who thought love was something you purchased, who died not because his heart stopped but because he never had one to begin with. She started down the stairs. Maya. She stopped. Turned. And for a moment, he saw the girl he'd married, the one who'd looked at him like he hung the moon, who'd believed his lies about late meetings and business trips, who'd cried herself to sleep thinking she wasn't enough. That girl was gone. I'm not going to destroy you, she said. You're going to do that yourself, the same way you've destroyed everything you ever touched. I'm just not going to be there to clean up the mess anymore. The security guard handed her something, a yellow umbrella, cheap and bright and completely out of place against the luxury of the private airfield. Maya walked back up the stairs, rain soaking her sweater, and held it out to him. "What is this?" "It's raining," she said simply. "And despite everything, despite who you are and what you've done, I'm not you. I won't leave you with nothing." He stared at the umbrella like it was a weapon. "Take it, Kwang Ah. Or don't. But this is the last thing I'll ever give you." His hand reached out, muscle memory, maybe, or desperation, and closed around the cheap plastic handle. Maya descended the stairs for the final time, her security guard's umbrella sheltering her and the baby she carried. She didn't look back. Not when she reached the car. Not when the jet engines began their whine. Not when her plane taxied away, carrying his children toward a future that would never include him. Tak Kwong stood alone on the wet tarmac, holding a $10 umbrella while a billion-dollar life evaporated into rain. The umbrella was yellow. Bright and cheap and absurdly cheerful. Like hope for people who'd never had any. Like mercy for men who'd never shown it. He opened it. And for the first time in 40 years, the man who wasn't really Tak Kwong, who wasn't really anyone anymore, began to cry. If you enjoyed the story, please like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Thank you for watching.